Welcome back to raceday.tv. We are in the Willem Prinsloo Agricultural Museum, and we're going to have a look at the origins of transport and how not much has changed in racing. The event is the Track N4 National Rally Championship. The guys are just coming back from their recce that they did this morning, so they can update all the notes. But walking through here this morning, we're going to get to talk to them a little bit later. Walking through here this morning, I was just looking at various suspension systems. And you know how in Formula One they talk about FRIC, which is the front and rear interconnected suspension, which was really a big advance to get cars to handle proper. Well, in 1879, here is a buggy. And just looking at this buggy, and what caught my eye first was working out the roll center of this thing. And because it's got a solid axle, we know that the roll center of the thing is right above in the center of the axle. But it's got a very nice suspension system here, leaf spring, of course, which has vertical compliance for the chassis. So the chassis is well suspended on the suspension. But then, what caught my eye was the FRIC system. Formula One, a couple of years ago, 1879. The FRIC system, front and rear interconnected suspension. So here you have a leaf spring that goes all the way to the back, and it does two jobs. Colin Chapman would be so proud of this. He always thought that anything that you added to a racing car, number one, had to be super light, and number two, had to have more than one function. So this big leaf spring over here does two things. It connects the front and rear suspensions, but it also adds sideways roll stiffness to the chassis. It is, nothing changes as they go. And of course, for those of you who like bicycles, 29-inch wheel bicycles became the big thing because of rolling resistance. Well, in 1879, they knew a thing or two about roll resistance. So there's our suspension. Leaf springs were big in the day, and again, you've now got suspension, so it's got some roll stiffness, and it's got its vertical thing. And then they also understood about radius rods. The Formula Fords, racing cars have radius rods to keep the track. Big V8. I tell you what, the Mobil 1 V8 supercars, they all use a system of links. Well, here you go. Same thing here. You've got a link that comes all the way down here to the end of the axle. And because mathematics and geometry was a cool thing, you now have this other little bit of metal, that adds strength to it. Really, really cool. The origins of the Gautrain. We thought Gautrain was something special to go from Joburg to Pretoria and Pretoria to Joburg. Well, this is the origin of the Gautrain. Here you see it. This was a coach. This coach actually made it. It's called the Pretoria coach, and it made it to Cape Town in 3 months. I tell you what, the speed is absolutely frightening. And we're going to walk across here. And something else that struck me, Gary, was how stuff does change, but not so much. Lightness in construction, composite materials. So here they've got a combination of wood and steel. Got to love composite materials. This is the early transport museum at the Willem Prinsloo Agricultural Museum. I'd love to spend a whole lot more time because there's some tractors through there. We're not going to look at them now, but we're going to walk across here. And then what struck me, you know how we love all sorts of motorsport. And in particular, last weekend, we were in Lichtenberg to watch Fernando Alonso start his journey on Dakar racing. So it was a round of the South African cross-country series. We found the origin of the South African cross-country series. And here we have the first vehicle. They didn't quite call it the SACCS back then, but this is a wagon that the Oaks raced from Cape Town eventually to Joburg. It had to be a race because human beings are naturally competitive. This is an 1894 version of a Toyota Gazoo racing bakkie.
Maybe it could have been a missing bucky.
Well, Terence Marsh loves strong vehicles. And we had a look at look how cool this chassis is here in order to keep the stiffness and the axle, all designed with, and where were our we've got quick release wheels. Gary, here they are.
Yeah.
So, in order to change the wheel, you just take this pin out of here and the whole wheel comes off. And it had, you got the very fancy wheel rims that are built multi-piece wheel rims.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. They had multi-piece wheel rims back then. Right, let's take a quick walk across some of the sports cars.
Colin, what I also like is the way that they get to the lightness on top.
Well, Gary, we all know that bamboo is a super material.
Yeah.
And it's light and it's stiff because it's got air on the inside.
Yeah.
Honeycomb structures. There you go. Here you've got a honeycomb structure for the roll cage. They had a proper roll cage back in the day. Right. Each one of them, as I said earlier, Gary, I'd love to spend, this is a training wagon, love to spend time, a lot more time having a look at them. And you know how we like horsepower? These things were upgradable all the time because...
So they could run anything from 4 to 16 horses.
Absolutely, and it's easy to double your horsepower nowadays, to double your horsepower.
Looking at this, could this have been the first race car transporter?
Gary, no, I think this was the food truck. But we are going to have a look at a very early version of a bucky. Again, racing with tools. So this was a tent wagon. There's a bigger tent wagon, and they put, because corporate entertainment is such a big thing at modern off-road racing events. Well, here they took their tents with them and their accommodation with them. These things there's a lot of love in them, and they haven't. What I really like is that they haven't been destroyed in restoration. They are beautifully and lovingly built. So you need some brakes. Check here. Here's your brake. And as you turn this, you've got a pinion gear and a worm drive. So this moves up and down, and it puts the brakes on. And here you've got, Ferodo would be very proud of these composite. And they talk about green materials and how we're moving to a green environment.
Yeah.
Well, they had it right here. And, every tree became a brake pad shop.
What are you going to come up with next? Surprise
Gary?
me.
Well, I'm surprising myself at the moment. Where this is a wheat threshing machine. Again, it's just got a tree stump for its brakes. And we came through here, Gary, because we actually want to walk and have a look at some tractors. A steam-powered machine that actually drove along. And because they went through lots of bushes, you had to drop the chimney so that for low aerodynamics.
This is a hydraulic chimney lift.
Powered by one man. And we come through here into this hall, and it's nice and cool and quiet and gives you a chance to have a look at some of these awesome machines. An old straw baler. And we found a few tractors that we really wanted to have a look at, Gary. One of them, traction was always a thing. And we talk about mechanical traction, and we talk about interruptions as well. So mechanical traction, how in Australia and America they've got mud racing? Well, these are early mechanical parts to get you out of the mud and move you along. We're going to walk down the back here and have a look at some other tractors. Here's a more extreme version, and this is kind of cool. So, MotoGP, they've got different compound tires.
So here you've got the slick on the outside.
You got the slick for when the surface is relatively sealed and smooth, and then you got the mud diggers for Mickey Thompson mud digger tires. There you go. That's how they started. And there's these are two single-cylinder. Peter Lance, this reminded me of you. So it says Lance and it says Bulldog. quite appropriate. Single-cylinder diesel tractor.
But I know you're going to show me something just now which really relates to modern-day supercars.
Here's a bakkie. One of the first bakkies that was invented. Proper, nice big tires for traction, and you can put stuff in here. I'm not sure where you were going with that supercar thing, Gary, but driver sits right-hand side. It's beautiful. It really is very, very nice. 4-cylinder petrol engine. And then we come across down here to steam-powered. Now I know. In the Formula One world, we talk about McLarens. This is a McLaren. It's not an MP.
I bet you nobody over there is going to believe us. But we will show them why.
We're going to show you. This is an early McLaren. The spelling is absolutely correct. It's not an MP4cc or an MP12, and I can never tell them apart, all the different McLarens. It's not even a P1. I think this is a McLaren T1. Now you think that this is a pulling machine? Look at the traction that it's got. It's got proper bars for traction. And here you go. McLaren, 1913. So there we go. It's a McLaren. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed. There's some beautiful tractors and if you follow the camber designed to run in a furrow, center steering, got to love it. If you love racing cars, if you love transport, if you like horsepower, come here to the Willem Prinsloo Transport Museum. It is magnificent. They've even got bits here. There's a history of Mampur. We're not going to have a look at that because we're responsible adults and we're at a motor racing event. So, on that note, thank you for joining us for our brief history of the Gautrain, South African motorsport, and McLaren supercars. Have a lekker Friday. We will talk later. Cheers.